Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Toon podcast. We've got a slight different break from tradition because we've been covering the transfer windows of late, but being a bit chaotic in terms of Newcastle United has gone, so we've decided to focus our attention on the latest arrival, or one of the latest arrivals, that's in James's Park, and that is Park Seung-Soo. And we have a very special guest to help us go through that today, and that is South Korean football expert Joel Kim. Joel is joining us all the way from New York. So this is literally the long distance podcast we have ever done. Joel, thank you very much and good morning to yourself.
Yeah, good evening to you guys in your time. And it's a pleasure to join you guys for this podcast. And I'm excited to talk about Park and I'm excited to get to know more of the Magpie fan base.
Yeah, but before we dive in and start going all about the new recruit for Newcastle, you want to tell a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the South Korean football landscape?
Yeah, and so I am what you call a super fan of the Korean national team and just South Korean football in general. I'm a content creator. For me, following Korean football is something I've done my entire life. My dad was a huge fan of the Korean national team, and I would say he passed on that passion, that legacy to me. And although I am a sports fan in general, I follow all the major sports teams in the metro area. You could tell by my Yankees hat. There is one enduring, sports team that I follow all my life, and that is the Korean national team. Obviously because I'm Korean, and they represent me, and I just have a deep, abiding passion as well, just for Asian masculinity to be portrayed in a way that is far different than the ways it's been portrayed in the past. Just a little bit about me. When I grew up in the '90s, I know I look a little younger, but when I grew up in the '80s and '90s, I've noticed that Asian men were oftentimes portrayed in very negative stereotypes and tropes, and either as kung fu martial artists or nerds. And I think one of the passions that I have for representing Korean football and Asian football on that note is just seeing Asian men that fall outside of the typical stereotype and that trope, and seeing guys like Son HeungMin represent us really well. Captain, at least, formerly captain of a Premier League team, and just a role model, a good stand-up figure. And one of my passions for representing and covering Korean national team football to the foreign fan base is to show that side of Asian masculinity that is in a way respectable and admirable, apart from the stereotypes that in the past we've traditionally or typically kind of fallen in. And so I have deeper purposes for covering football other than just for the sport. I also have a deep passion for just the way, again, the culture has, typically portrayed Asian men. And I just rejoice these days because I think that's really changed and flipped around. And I think that, it's my privilege to cover Korean football in this time where there's a huge spotlight is being placed on Asia. A huge spotlight is being placed on Korean football athletes, and so yeah, those are some of my passions. And right now in Korean football, especially, we're living in what I would call the closest thing we had to a golden generation with a lot of our players in big name clubs. And Park Seung-Soo, hopefully, will continue that tradition and be part of that.
Yeah, fantastic. So we'll crack on. We'll start going through. It's going to be an interesting one. Really looking forward to seeing what insights that you have. But it was maybe 6 weeks ago, I believe. I think I seen a tweet from yourself that Newcastle were interested in signing Park and that a deal was very close. And I think I watched a few clips again on your Twitter handle where I think one of our youth scouts actually went over to South Korea to check out some of the talent. In those videos, was Park part of those videos, or was he somebody in a different video altogether? It was like a bit of a glimpse as to the player that we could potentially be signing.
Yeah, I don't think he was. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but he wasn't obviously visible in any of those videos at the moment because negotiations and talks were still proceeding. But I wouldn't be surprised if that scout, maybe touch base with Park as a representative of Newcastle in Korea, and had some sort of interaction with him. But as for the question whether he was part of those videos, he was not. Again, discussions were still proceeding at that time, but they are proceeding in a good direction. And the report that I initially shared from Korean journalist So Ho-jung was that it was nearly a done deal. I think that's why he let it out. And so he's a very reputable and accurate journalist in those regards. So yeah, that's just the kind of way it panned out.
Well, reputable journalism is something that is a hot topic on social media right now, with all the transfer shenanigans going on in and outside of a club. But we'll have maybe a conversation for another day on that one. But Park is very highly rated. I mean, 28 senior appearances, I believe, for Blue Wings in all competitions, and he's been capped by the country at under 20 level, I think, 5 times. From my research of that one. And I believe he's also the youngest player ever to score in the K-League. Is that correct?
He's the youngest player score in the K-League 2.
K-League 2, okay.
Yeah.
So that's still one hell of a prestige to have, that is a good honour. And for his signature, apparently we beat off the likes of Bayern Munich, Marseille and a few other teams to get him to come to Newcastle, and to beat the likes of Bayern Munich, who are a European heavyweight, and something we aspire to be. That's quite an achievement for a little club here in the northeast of England.
Absolutely. As far, even from about a year and a half ago, he was apparently scheduled to do a trial with the U19 team in Bayern Munich, but I think because of the U21 national team duties, he wasn't able to make that. Either that, or he had to play for his the first team for Suwon Samsung Blue Wings. But he had from way back, he had that connection with Bayern Munich. So honestly, I honestly thought that he was going to head over there. It seemed like they had a really good, they have a good partnership with Suwon Samsung Blue Wings.
All right.
And I thought that he was going to be part of Bayern Munich. But I'm surprised to see that he's now in Newcastle, because again, he was linked to so many teams, and chief among them was Bayern. And so yeah, I think it was something that I was really actually happy to see, because I actually wanted him to be in the Prem. And Newcastle, being a huge club, huge storied history, tradition in the Prem, I think it's a great landing space for a guy like him. So props to you guys for being able to snab him from a big club, the likes of Bayern. My gut reaction to that is I think that maybe he felt there would be more opportunity for him to grow and develop here in Newcastle than Bayern, because Bayern Munich is one of the top clubs in the world. Like you have to be literally one of the best players in the world to even get a crack at a first team, or even have an opportunity. And so I think that would have been just too much for him, at this point. And I think he wanted a place where he was invested into, where he would be given more of a platform, more of an opportunity to prove himself, yet be at a club that's huge, a big club, a Prem club, and playing in the best league in the world. And so I think he made a wise decision going to Newcastle, and I'm pretty ecstatic that he landed here.
Nice one. Well, speaking of platform, as you mentioned there, we did actually get to see him have 2 little cameo appearances in the Asian tournament that had just recently finished. So he played against the Korean All-Stars 11. I think he had about maybe a 15-minute cameo on that one. And then he came on a little bit more of a time against Spurs. And to be honest, from what we had seen, because we had the games broadcast live over here in Australia. So there was interesting to see. And to be honest, he was probably our best player in against the 11, because that was a shambolic performance, to be honest. And the performance against Spurs, against more, better quality opposition, let's say, in Spurs. And obviously he was playing against, I think it's his hero, Son HeungMin. And I've seen he's got a signed shirt off him after the game, so that was pretty sweet. For those who didn't get to see him play, and I don't know if you did yourself, could you just fill in what type of player Park is, what his strengths and attributes are moving forward?
Yeah. And so for a player like Park, his strengths are his pace, his speed, his athleticism, his dribble. He himself said, my strength that I bring to the game is my dribble. And so, for a player that of his size and his, just, you know, he's just a very, he's very gifted athlete in regards to just raw ability, just his physicality. That's what he brings. He just brings a real edge, playing on the wing and taking players on, taking defenders on 1v1, or drawing attention from the defense and then creating an opportunity to score. Otherwise, for the CF or any other player coming down the middle, and so he brings that kind of he brings that versatility to the offense. But yeah, I think that's probably his strength. He's a fast player. He's a very tricky player. He's got fantastic technical abilities. A lot of Koreans, just in general, are very good technically, and he's there's still a lot of development that he needs to. There's still a lot of growth. He's still very raw, but the groundwork is there in terms of his ability and his potential. And so I told another guy recently from Newcastle that I think with Son HeungMin leaving, he's probably, in regards to hopefully a future successor or someone who can be like a Sony type figure. I mean, he's the closest one that we have in the sense that his body type his body type is literally the same as Sony. Like the way his body's composed, like he's got Sony's body, the legs, everything. I think he's not as polished. He's not as refined as a goal scorer like Yang Min-hyuk of the Spurs. But he is 1 year younger, and he's got some room to develop, and he's got some ceiling to grow into. So I think in that regard, there's a lot of similarities and a lot of comparisons being made. But then again, I also just do want to say to Newcastle, we shouldn't hype him up so much or put too much pressure on him. Yeah. Sonny, at his age or even younger than him, was already scoring goals in the Bundesliga. Just to put it that way. And so Park is still a very far cry from Sonny. But what I'm saying is that in regards to body type and in regards to the agility and speed and technicality, you can't wonder. You blink your eyes, you think you're looking at Sonny, the way he moves with the ball. But in regards to that scoring instinct and things like that, he's still got a bit of ways to go. But that's the kind of player that he is, and I'm sure for the Newcastle ownership and leadership, that's kind of hope they have for him. I assume, bringing him to Newcastle, that he could be a Sony type figure. Yeah.
Well, with Eddie Howe, I don't know if you've followed much of any of the previous players that Eddie is worked with or currently working with, but he is, as far as I'm concerned, and this may just have me black and white glasses on or whatever it be. Yeah. He is the best coach in the Premier League, if not maybe even Europe, for developing young talent. So we've got the likes of Lewis Hall, Tino Livramento. They've all made their England debuts at very young ages. Lewis Hall is probably going to be a world-class left back. Tino could very well be a world-class right back. And he's also changed other players who maybe a little later into their career have had to redevelop their game. For example, Joel and Eom. He was signed as a £40 million striker from Germany. Never really cut it as a striker. And he's seen the potential in him, put him into midfield, and now he is a midfield powerhouse. So in terms of anybody looking in at Newcastle and saying, how can this player develop? Then as far as I'm concerned, Eddie Howe is the right coach for that. Give Eddie a project, and that project will succeed. And I'd imagine that would be something that Parker's looked at and go, I can see the potential that these players have had, where they've already come from in a short space of time. Get me into Newcastle, please. Is that something where his mentality would be at?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I didn't know to that scale, to that extent of what a developer that he is. And so you sharing that with me excites me, and it makes me more happy that he's at Newcastle. That's great. Probably the best location for a player like him. Yeah. He is probably the most rawest prospect that we have in regards to just his raw potential and what he could be in just Korean football in general at the moment. And so for him to land at a place where you have a coach renowned for his ability to develop players and take them to the next level, that's the best place Park would be. And I'm sure Park and his agents and his team, I'm sure they're aware of that. And that's probably a huge reason why, again, he landed at Newcastle as opposed to going to Marseille or Bayern Munich, where, in those kind of places, he might have just been left on the shelf to kind of catch dust and really not develop. So that's great.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing me that insight. Yeah.
No, you're more than welcome. It's a journey that a lot of the players have went on, and a lot of them have succeeded. He's got a very, very good success rate for that. And speaking of Eddie in Newcastle style, so our style of play is high energy, pressing, high tempo. Is this something that we've already witnessed in the K League too, or his style of play, or is it something that he would have to adapt and bring to his game?
Yeah, I think he's a very aggressive player, and so I think his aggression and just his energy lends itself well to a high press style, attacking style. So I'm sure that's something Newcastle noticed, and that's why they recruited him for. And you got to see a bit of that, even against the Spurs.
You did
when he was matched against Jed Spence, who was a very good fullback. I was really encouraged to see him hold his ground and be aggressive and, just hound him. And he fouled him a little bit, but, he was able to really be scuffy with him. And so, again, he's only 18. He just turned 18 in March, so he's a young kid. And so going against a good fullback like Spence and granted, he has energy, right? Because it's, he's on this platform, so he's got a little bit of, he's got that spark in him, in that kind of situation. Granted, to his favor, but still, with that added dynamic, I think he did pretty well, and I think it just showed a glimpse of the player that he could be down the line in the future. And so yeah, the things that you're saying that about that characterize Newcastle style, I'm sure like any fan could kind of see how he could fit in, just even from his short cameos against the K League All-Stars as well as Spurs, and so we'll see kind of how he develops from here.
Yeah, and speaking of changing everything, obviously coming from the K League 2 to the Premier League, I don't think anybody would argue that there is a world of difference in terms of quality.
Absolutely.
What will he need to change about his physical side of the game, if that is something? And obviously you said he's quite pacey, so he shouldn't really have any trouble with that one. But the strength and the physicality of the Premier League is probably what draws a lot of people to. Is that something where you think you need to maybe bulk up, or just keep as he is? You wouldn't want to lose that pace.
No, 100%. For any Korean football player coming into England, playing the Championship or the Premier League, and actually even maybe more so the Championship. I think argument can be made that Championship is even more physical than the Prem.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the biggest impediment that they struggle with, apart from the language, barrier. Playing with players that are strong, that are big, and they're fast. And I've heard it said, Ji-sung of Swansea has said that he thinks that players in the K League actually, they kick the ball more skillfully than people in the Championship and in England.
Okay.
But they don't have the space to showcase that ability, because when they're playing in the Championship, they're just getting so roughed up by players who are a lot more physical and fast, and they're getting smothered, that style. And so there's always a painful adjusting period, especially in the Championship, for a lot of our Korean players to bulk up, to gain muscle, and just to adapt to the pace of the league and the physicality of the players in the league, because they're just not used to it. Ji-sung, again, and for anyone who's listening, you guys can look up Joel Kim Ji-sung interview and check out one of the interviews that I did with Ji-sung, where he talks about his adjustment to the Championship. And honestly, I recommend that for any fan base that wants to gain an insight into what Korean players go through when they go to England. It's fantastic. He really goes deep into that. But in that interview, he also mentions that that the difference between coming from the K League 1 to the Championship was like the difference from a player like Ji-sung moving from Korean high school football to the K League 1. And so that's a huge difference. And so you take that and then you magnify that from K League 2 to the Premier League, to the best league in the world. You'd imagine that there will be some adjustment. There will be some major adaptation that Park Seung-Soo will have to make. And even if the Prem is slightly less physical and less grittier, I guess, in some sense, than the Championship, without a doubt, he's going to have to adapt in his body. And he actually mentioned that in interview. He mentioned that in a recent interview, he said that, the players at Newcastle, they're perfect, physical specimens, and that he has a bit of ways to go to match that. And so I think he knows the work that he has to do. He's got it all cut out for him, and he has to put that work. But that's an adjustment that he'll have to make, and it's going to take time. And granted, he had some encouraging cameos against the K-League All-Stars and the Spurs, but I don't think that's indicative of a full, obviously, 90-minute shift for him. And so, I just want to say, be prepared for the ups and downs. Be prepared for games where he's just out of it, or he's not really into the floor, or he may even look like a passenger. That's all part of the growing process, and I would just really advocate patience with him, at his youth, at his young age right now.
It's one thing, to be honest. I think us Newcastle fans are quite good about is being patient with player development.
That's good.
That again is something Eddie is very, very patient with. Again, certain players, he will only make a few appearances throughout the season, but we know the work is going on behind the scenes, and we know over time that player will come good. So the odd cameo, maybe the odd early cup game, or some games where we're kind of coasting, he can come in and just run his legs off and see what can happen in there, that side of things. But everyone's excited to see him play in the Premier League, to be honest. And we're having Champions League football. There's more games ever to play. Not that he may get a chance in the Champions League, but it may open up opportunities in other games that may open up throughout the season.
I would love to see that. I would absolutely see that. I'm going to be honest. It's hard for me to see that right now, because, again, he just played for 20 minutes in front of a home crowd in 2 games. The guy's juiced up, and so he's bringing his best. But now that when he returns back to England and the work begins in earnest, I think it's going to start hitting him, with the reality of the level of competition that he's facing. So it's hard for me to see that, but is there anyone more than me that would like to see that? No. I mean, I would love to see him play. I would love to see him surpass my expectations of what he could do on the pitch. And it would be fantastic, absolutely fantastic for someone like that to do that. And if he made his debut in the Premier League at this point, he would make history as the youngest Korean to make his debut at his age right now. Because HeungMin, it doesn't look like he's anywhere near making his debut for the first team of Spurs, and there's indication and news that he's going to be loaned out again. Kim Ji-soo was the youngest up till now. He made a debut for Brentford at 19, but Park by 18. By far, he would be the youngest, and that would be amazing and great to see. So if Eddie Howe can work with him and in a short time get him ready to play in the Premier League, my hat's off to Eddie Howe.
Yeah, if anybody can do it, Eddie definitely can. Now, just going back through some of the other South Korean footballers that have made their name in the Premier League, there are 2 names that come to mind. Obviously, Son HeungMin is probably the most well-known South Korean football, probably across the world, I would say. The other one, he's been long since retired now, is Park Seung-Soo, the Manchester United midfielder.
Yeah.
How does Park compare to these 2, and do you think he has a ceiling to get as close to these 2 later on in his career?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about 2 all-time greats in Korean national team football, like 2 all-time legends, not just Korean football, but Asian football in general. Yeah. And so I'm not quite sure, honestly, if that's fair an expectation to put on an 18-year-old out of K-League 2. It's like you're comparing these guys are like the Messis of Asian football, and so it's very drastic. So it's very hard for me to say right now, whether he can even come, I hope, but it's hard for me to say he can come close to reaching Son's level. Because again, Son, even at his age at Park, even younger than Park at 17, he was already scoring goals for Hamburg. And so he was just on another level already. So again, I don't think, I'm not sure if it would be fair to place expectation right now. But again, he's young, and there is potential. There is a possibility for him to, emerge and develop and grow to be a game impactor like Son or like Park Ji-sung. So the best answer I can give you is way soon to tell right now. If Eddie Howe is able to develop this guy to the ability of those players, and wow, that would be incredible to see, and that would be the biggest testament to Eddie Howe's ability to as a coach and as a player developer. But my hope is that he would become, because we need him. He would become the next I guess, Sonny in the league, along with Yang Min Hyuk, in terms of the next great goal scorer for Korean football. And that's anyone and everyone's hope. And as a Korean national team fan, we need him to be that. We need the next person to rise in the Korean national team, because Sonny's time, he's past his prime, and although he's going to make this next World Cup, obviously this will probably be his last World Cup. We need other of our younger generation to rise, and so we need him to be that. So that is a great hope, but it's just way soon to tell at this moment. But we're hoping, we're and hopefully, on our side and on the Jordy side, we're going to cheer him on, believe in him, and just back him to the best of our ability and see what he can do from there. That's the best that we can provide. Not being too harsh on the lad, but just continue to give patience and let Eddie Howe do his thing. But yeah, it's too soon to tell, obviously, whether he can even reach the level of those legends. Yeah.
Now, how is this transfer reacted back in South Korea? Was this deemed as a big transfer? Or was it just something like brushed down the carpet, back page news type thing, not really talked about? Or was this something where I was like, hold on, let's now take a look at what other emerging talents maybe coming from South Korea?
Yeah, and so I get asked this question a lot from different fan bases, like, how are Korean people taking this? And for me, it's surprising, because I would assume maybe in England, like, it's football culture's everywhere. So when you got players going out, it's just like, okay, whatever, that's cool, that's nice. But you gotta understand, like, for a country like Korea, where we haven't really been like a dominant nation by any means, and we're a growing nation, and our football imprint on the world is growing and expanding. Our whole country, we get behind any player, honestly, that goes overseas, that plays in Europe, let alone England in the Premier League. And so for Park Seung-Soo to make it to England and be signed by a Premier League and be the 20th Korean player to sign a contract with a Premier League team, let alone a team like Newcastle, of course, it's huge news. Of course, he gets automatically a huge spotlight placed upon him, and all the more because of his age, because of his youth, and because of his potential, and being that he's a prospect. So yes, he is big news. This is huge news in Korea, and the entire Korean nation and fan base will jump on board the Jordy bandwagon to support him, and so. So I look forward to just even for the Newcastle fan base just to even grow and the brand to even expand because of Park Seung-Soo coming aboard and bringing the Asian market and just the Asian fan base along with him.
Well, there was some Newcastle fans wearing Park Seung-Soo shirts during the games. So his name's already getting out there. So the brand awareness of what is Newcastle United in the fan base is already starting to grow. And hopefully the more appearances, the bigger that gets. And we obviously get a top quality player and we get more fans, and the club is all the better for it. Now, you touched before about not wanting to put too much heap or praise on Park because he's still so young. What do you think of the tagline of the South Korean Mbappe?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, Park Seung-Soo in an interview last year, he said that was his motto. That's what we wanted.
Okay.
So although a lot of people were like, "Hey, man, people were seeing Sonny in him," he was like, "Well, I like Sonny, but I want to be like Mbappe. That's the kind of player I want to be." And so, I think with elite wingers and world-class offensive players, whether it's Sonny or Mbappe, there's similarities they all share across the board. And I guess to some extent, those things do extend to Park and his abilities and what he can do. Again, because he's just so an aggressive dribbler and just his ability to go 1v1 and just his speed and his pace. You can see similarities on that level, although it may be a minor level with Mbappe.
Yeah.
But in regards to like goal scoring and all that, there's still a lot to be proven in regards to, just that killer goal scoring ability. But I do like the fact the fact that the lad has taken a player like Mbappe to model himself afterwards, and hopefully he can be if he can even come. I mean, somewhat even close to being on the
Yeah.
Mbappe level in goal scoring ability, Newcastle's got themselves quite a player on their hands.
Absolutely. And actually, I meant to ask you this at the beginning. Did you know if there was any transfer fee or what the valuation was for this deal by any chance? Because it was never mocked, and I don't think it normally is for youngsters coming through.
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't recall what it is. My gut instinct, I do think it was rumored to be around maybe, maybe like 2 or 3 million euros. I don't quote me on that. I don't know for sure, but I faintly on top of my head think that it was around that range. Yeah.
Right. That's, to be honest, that's a substantial amount for a player from a lower league. 2 to 3 million euros, but there's obviously the potentials there, and that's what we want to see. Now, looking further ahead, say 2 to 4 years from now, what would you see as success for Park? What looks like success to you?
2 or 3 years from now, success for Park would be making the first team and Newcastle, being part of the starting 11. It would be scoring, being able to score. Being able to score 5 to 10 goals a season at that point, I think will be very successful for Park. And if you can do even more than that, incredible. But I think he'll be 2021, scoring 5, 10 goals. I mean, that'll put him even close to what Sonny did at that age level when he was in Bundesliga with Leverkusen. And so if you were to compare their track rates, I think Park would be in a very good place, and he would have accomplished a lot at his age to do this. I think he would be the youngest, even in Korean football, to score that amount of goals in the Premier League. But yeah, I think being part of the starting 11 would and being a contributor and being an impact player would be a measure of success to evaluate Park. And I say that because it's not guaranteed 2 or 3 years that he's going to be here. He could be loaned out somewhere down the line. You don't know what the future will bring. But if he were to find himself in that place, I would think he would have. I think he would have made it. Yeah.
If he's in and around the first team in 2 to 3 years, which again, that's probably peak Eddie Howe time for a player, if not maybe a little bit too long in terms of development. He could very well be kicking on if that is the case from there. Now, in terms of making it for the national team, the first team that is, because obviously he's already represented the under-20s. How close is he to that, or is he still way off that quality as of now?
Yeah, he's way off as of now. For him to be even considered for the national team, he has to be playing for the first team regularly. Unless he's already proven himself on the K-League, which Youngmin already has. Youngmin was the runner-up to the MVP, his first season. He had a historic K-League 1 season, and then he went to Spurs, and then he was loaned to QPR. But I think because of his K-League 1 pedigree that he brought with him, I think he was called to the national team. He got the call-up. But again, with Park, he showed some signs that he showed some really promising signs for a guy his age playing the K-League 2, but he hasn't had nearly the same amount of impact that Youngmin had. And so again, that's just how raw and young of a project that Park is. And so to be called up to the national team, you wouldn't be able to be called up unless you have some degree of accomplishment that you made in your football career already, or you were playing regular minutes for the first team. So don't reckon we'll see him anytime soon. For him to make the World Cup squad would be a huge achievement. I'll just put it that way. And so for him to, let's say, make some waves this year at Newcastle and see somehow even, break the record of youngest Korean to play in the Prem, that would be huge for Park. And we'll see if he can even crack the World Cup squad. But I mean, I'm rooting. I'm hoping he has the most amazing first season that he could have with the club. But that's just the way that things run here in the national team. You don't really make the team unless you're really pushing things forward with the first team of your local club squad. Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing, because obviously that means he's then going to force the development effectively in terms of his own natural ability, let it come through, that sort. And I know a lot of players, when they do get moved to a bigger team, that pretty much instantly gives them international success because of their high profile at a bigger club. But if that's the way the national team does it, then the players can only prosper for that because they have to work towards getting that cap and then moving forward. And if that's going to make him a better player for us, then that's only going to make him a better player for the national team too. So everybody is a winner in that regard. But just before we do wrap this up, Joel, is there anything regarding Park that you think we should know moving forward? And if there was any other type of player in world football right now that he was similar to, who would you class that player to be?
Those are good questions right now. I apologize, mate. It's just the morning here, so it's hard for me to
that's all good.
my thoughts together. I'm like losing my train of thought. I just woke up like 30 minutes, like an hour ago. So I'm trying to provide something of value to you guys, but I think with just Park, I would just again preach patience, and I would say don't get so excited about his recent cameos. I think they're a bit biased in certain ways because again he's playing in front of the home crowd and it's his first time on the pitch, so he's going to bring that youthful energy and that exuberance and that zeal. And even Young Min Hyuk, or honestly any Korean player that's made it overseas, always look good in the first appearance. But then afterwards, when the grind starts kicking in, that's when you really see like, okay, where is the player really at? And even a guy like Yang struggled quite a bit at QPR afterwards, after his initial first few appearances that looked really promising. And so I would say Park, there are going to be times where Park looks rather ordinary and doesn't look like there's anything special to him because he's going to hit a wall is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But I just preach patience. There's a reason that Eddie Howe went out to get a guy like him. And obviously because of who Eddie Howe is and the developer that he is, you guys know that better than anyone else. Just give him time, and I'm encouraged that you were telling me that the Magpie fan base is a fan base that is patient with their players. That's great because that's not something I see in any other fan base that I interact with. I'll tell every other fan base be patient with their players. They'll be like, oh yeah, sure, but then a few bad spells on the pitch, people will be like, ship him back. They'll lose confidence. Yeah. So obviously don't do that with Park. He's still a very young player. In regards to someone that is comparable, that I can see, I like I said, in regards to his dribbling and the movement of the ball, like in the past I've said he reminds me a lot of Sonny. Just in the ways that he's able to just get by his defender and just the way he's very smooth with the ball and just his acceleration on the pitch and just being a very vertical player that he is, reminds me very much of Sonny in that regard. But in regards to finishing ability in the final third, still a bit of ways to go for a guy like Park. And I will see comparisons. Some journalists have thrown out like Lamine Yamal. And I think in regards to his age level, yeah, they're both very young and they're both very, their body types. I guess he also has a very similar type of Lamine Yamal too, with the shoulders, and he's just very bony and muscular at the same time. But yeah, he's. I think I'm tempted to agree with these journalists in saying like he could be Korea's Lamine Yamal, but Lamine is an absolute world-class talent.
Yes.
The things that he does with the ball, I don't think it's fair to compare him with a prodigy like that at this point. But these comparisons are being made, and they're being made, with the best intentions and with the best of hopes that Park would rise to be a player that could become like them. And there's, he has that potential. So we'll see where he goes. And I think at the end of the day, he's in the best hands in Eddie Howe's hands. And so that's an encouraging thing to know. And so we just have to wait and see how he does develop. But good start, a very good start for him. Being able to play on the pitch under very bright limelights against K-League All-Stars and holding his own against them, and as well as playing against a team like Spurs against a fullback like Spence. So I would say, with everything I've shared already, that it is a very promising beginning, and the fan base clearly, the Geordie fan base clearly sees that, and they're excited, they're stoked, they call him class, and I love seeing that. I love seeing the love that he's already being shown by the fan base. yet at the same time, just pump the brakes a little bit. He's a young lad. He's going to take time to grow. He's going to, I'm sure, get his moments, get his shifts in with the U21 team. But hopefully he can crack the first team, and hopefully he can be the type of player that the Jordy fan base wanted in regards to a player that can come in this transfer season and make an impact. Maybe who knows? Maybe Park can be the type of player. Maybe he can surprise the world in doing that. I would love to see it myself.
Absolutely we would. But we will wrap up there. Joel, thank you very much for climbing out of bed so early this Wednesday morning, I believe it is, over there for yourself. Wednesday night here. I'll let you maybe go back to sleep if you wish to. I know you've got some travel plans coming up over the weekend, so you can enjoy those. But if you want to, give Joel a follow on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it these days. His handle is KNT Football. And we will probably try and find that interview that you mentioned before. And I can pop the link in the description down below if you're on YouTube and click on that one. Feel free to give that a watch. But otherwise, Joel, mate, thank you very much for your insights. It has been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully this time next year we can talk about how Park has made his breakthrough into the first team, and he's scored a worldie by beating 3 or 4 players and curling one into the top corner. How does that sound?
That would be absolutely fantastic and amazing. And thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to be on here. And I just want to say thank you to the Jordy fan base for really embracing Park and embracing me and all the fans that I also represent on the Korean side. We're ecstatic, and we're stoked to journey with you guys and see where Newcastle goes this season.
So thanks to everybody that's been watching as well, and everyone that's been listening. Please drop a comment down below, drop a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or give us a 5-star rating on the audio channels too. Thank you very much, and again, Joel, thank you, and we will see everyone on the next one. Cheers, mate.